In the quiet village of Molola, surrounded by tall palm trees and red earth paths, lived a couple everyone admired. Ngozi and Obinna were known as the perfect husband and wife. People in the village would often say, if you want to see true love, just look at Ngozi and Obinna. Ngozi was the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked by. Her beauty was soft and natural, skin smooth like fresh palm oil, eyes gentle like early morning rain, and a smile that could calm a crying child. But it wasn't just her beauty. Ngozi was humble, respectful, and always helpful to others. Obinna, her husband, was a school teacher. He was not the loud type, but his calm voice carried wisdom. Children loved him, and the elders respected him. He was the kind of man mothers wished for their daughters to marry. He built a fine house for Ngozi, with a wide veranda and fruit trees in the yard. He gave her nice clothes, fresh food, and treated her well in public. To the villagers, their marriage was perfect. No woman is more blessed than Ngozi, many would whisper. Obinna is a true man. But inside that fine house, behind the smiles and greetings, a silent pain was growing. Every night, Ngozi would lie beside her husband and wait. She longed for his touch, not just in the way of husband and wife, but in closeness, warmth, and intimacy. But Obinna always turned his back. Sometimes, he said he was tired. Other times, he said he had a long day at school. On some nights, he simply picked up a book and read until she fell asleep. At first, Ngozi didn't say anything. She thought maybe he was just tired from work. But weeks turned into months, and the distance between them grew. She tried everything, wearing the dress he once complimented, cooking his favorite yam and egusi soup, even lighting sweet-scented candles in the bedroom. But nothing changed. One evening, after dinner, Ngozi sat under the mango tree outside and stared at the moon. Her heart was heavy. Am I not beautiful enough? She whispered to herself. Does he no longer love me? She thought of talking to him, but she feared his response. Obinna was not a cruel man, but he had a way of shutting down when things got too personal. Ngozi didn't want to be seen as complaining. So she kept quiet and carried her sadness alone. The villagers, of course, didn't know any of this. They still praised the couple everywhere they went. At weddings, at markets, during church services, Ngozi and Obinna were seen as the perfect example of love. But behind her bright wrapper and soft smile, Ngozi was struggling. Every night, she felt more like a stranger in her own marriage. She didn't want anyone to see her pain. So she laughed when others praised her, and she played the part of the happy wife. But when the lights went out, and the house grew quiet, she would lie in bed, eyes wide open, heart full of questions. And still, Obinna turned his back. Ngozi didn't know the reason. But deep in her heart, she felt something wasn't right. Something was missing. And one day, she promised herself, she would find out what it was. Little did she know, the truth she was about to uncover would shake not only her world, but the entire village of Molola. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the distance between Ngozi and Obinna only grew deeper. In the daytime, they looked like the perfect couple, eating together, attending church, walking hand in hand through the village. But at night, behind closed doors, Ngozi's heart ached. She had tried everything a wife could think of, soft words, gentle touches, warm smiles. But Obinna stayed distant, almost like he was afraid to come close. And still, he never raised his voice, never got angry. He simply shut down, like a door that refused to open. One afternoon, unable to bear the weight in her chest, Ngozi visited her older sister, Chidinma, who lived in the next compound. Chidinma, a widow with 2 grown sons, was known in the village as a strong woman with wise advice. As Ngozi entered her home, Chidinma noticed the sadness in her sister's eyes. Ngozi, she said gently, something is troubling you. Speak, my dear. At first, Ngozi stayed quiet. But after a long pause, she finally whispered, "Obina, he won't touch me. Not in months. He's kind, respectful, but I feel like a ghost in my own marriage." Chidinma sat up straight, surprised. "Are you saying you and your husband haven't been together, like man and wife?" Ngozi nodded, holding back tears. "Have you asked him why?" "I tried," Ngozi said. "But he just tells me I should focus on spiritual things. He says he's tired. Or that I shouldn't think of such things too much." Chidinma frowned. "Ngozi, marriage is not just food and fine clothes. A woman needs more than just respect. You need love, closeness, affection. If something is wrong, you have the right to ask." "I know," Ngozi said softly. "But I don't want to sound selfish. What if he's going through something and doesn't want to talk?" Chidinma leaned forward and held her sister's hand. "Silence can kill a marriage faster than anger, my dear. If you stay quiet, you'll only suffer more. And who will speak for you?" Ngozi nodded slowly. She knew her sister was right. That night, she returned home with a heavy mind and a braver heart. After dinner, she found Obina reading in his study. She stood quietly at the door, watching him. His face was calm, his eyes fixed on the page. But to her, he looked distant, like a man trapped in a world she couldn't enter. "Obina," she said gently. He looked up. "Yes, my love. Can we talk?" He closed the book and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Sit." Ngozi sat beside him and took a deep breath. "I need to ask you something important." Obina shifted, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Go on. Why don't you come close to me? As a husband should. You're always so far away at night. Is there something wrong?" Obina's face changed. The calm expression faded. He looked down, then sighed. "Ngozi," he said, "why must you bring this up? A man is not just for such things. I am focused on more serious matters. There is more to marriage than just the body." "But I am your wife," she said softly. "Don't I matter too?" Obina stood up suddenly and walked toward the window. "You matter. But this conversation, I don't want to talk about it anymore." Ngozi sat there, frozen. Once again, the door had closed. That night, as she lay alone in their bed, tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. The silence in the room felt louder than any scream. She had spoken her heart, but Obina's wall had grown taller. Something was wrong. And if Obina would not tell her the truth, she would have to find it herself. Because her heart could no longer carry the silence alone. In Bolola village, secrets didn't stay hidden for long. The sun might rise quietly, but the tongues of neighbors always rose louder. And now, the whispers had begun. "Ngozi is so beautiful, yet no child still. 3 years and not even a pregnancy. Maybe she's barren. Or maybe, her husband is not doing what a husband should." The gossip floated through the air like smoke, soft at first, then thicker with every passing week. Ngozi heard the whispers, though no one dared say it to her face. Their smiles in public were warm, but their eyes carried questions. At the market, an older woman nudged another and said, "If I had that woman's beauty, my husband wouldn't sleep at night." They both laughed softly, glancing at Ngozi from a distance. The words stung, even though Ngozi pretended not to hear. She returned home that afternoon and sat quietly in the garden. The papaya tree swayed in the wind, but her mind was heavy. It wasn't just the loneliness anymore, it was the shame creeping in from outside. People were beginning to notice what she tried so hard to hide. That evening, her neighbor, Mama Ik, came by with a bowl of bitter leaf soup. She was known for her sharp tongue, but also her wisdom. "I don't mean to pry, my daughter," Mama Ik began, sitting beside Ngozi on the wooden bench. But your eyes no longer shine the way they used to. Ngozi forced a smile. I'm just tired. That's all. Mama Ik nodded slowly. Tiredness. That's a word women use when they carry silent loads. There was a pause. Sometimes, Mama Ik said in a softer tone, when a man carries a secret in his heart, even the moon hides behind the clouds. Ngozi looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? I mean, Mama Ik said, lowering her voice, there are things husbands don't say. Fears. Pains. Some are deep. Deeper than the river behind the hill. Then she stood up, handed over the soup, and said, you're a good woman. But don't let silence swallow your joy. When she left, Ngozi sat still, holding the warm bowl in her lap. Her heart was racing. Was Obinna hiding something? Could that be the reason for his distance? Later that night, Ngozi lay in bed beside Obinna, but her thoughts refused to rest. She glanced at him, his back to her as always. Eyes closed. Breathing slow. Was he really asleep? Or just pretending? She didn't touch him. She didn't ask questions. She just lay there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. In the following days, Ngozi started observing her husband more closely. He was gentle, still the same quiet man, still kind. But there were odd moments, when she walked into the room and he quickly closed his notebook. When he stayed up late alone in his study. When he flinched slightly at her touch, as if her closeness banned him. Something was wrong. One day, she followed him quietly and saw him lock the study room door, something he had never done before. From the other side, she heard strange sounds. At first, she thought it was music, but the silence between the noises told her otherwise. Her heart thudded in her chest. Was this the secret Mama Ik hinted at? Ngozi stood by the door, hand trembling, ears wide open. But she couldn't bring herself to knock. She simply turned around and walked away. That night, sleep didn't come to her. Only one thought remained in her mind. What is Obinna hiding from me? And deep within, she knew, the answer would change everything. It was a quiet Wednesday evening. The breeze from the hills rolled gently over the rooftops of Molola, stirring the palm trees and whispering secrets to anyone who would listen. In Obinna's house, however, silence ruled. Ngozi had cooked his favorite dinner, roasted plantain with spicy pepper fish, but Obinna barely touched the food. He thanked her, kissed her forehead, and excused himself to his study. I have papers to grade, he said, his voice calm, as always. Ngozi watched him walk away, her heart sinking. She had heard that sentence too many times. She waited for 30 minutes, then an hour. Finally, with quiet steps, she crept through the hallway. The door to the study was locked. That alone raised every hair on her body. Obinna never locked any doors in their house. She leaned closer. From behind the thick wooden door came muffled sounds, small, irregular movements, a quiet breath, then silence. Then it began again. Her heart pounded in her chest like a village drum. She placed her eye to the small gap beneath the door and saw a flicker of movement, his shadow stretching across the floor. Then, in a flash of moonlight through the window, she saw it. Obinna was seated in a chair, his shirt unbuttoned. He was moving in a way she recognized, though it shocked her to witness it with her own eyes. Alone, in secret, he was doing what he never allowed himself to do with her. Ngozi's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back, one hand covering her mouth. Her legs felt weak. Her chest was heavy. She didn't know whether to cry or scream. She tiptoed back to the bedroom, her mind in turmoil. Why would he choose that over me? For years, she had blamed herself, wondering if she was not attractive enough, not spiritual enough, not good enough. But now, the truth was sitting heavily on her chest like a stone. Obina wasn't just avoiding her, he was replacing her. The next morning, Ngozi was quiet during breakfast. Obina chatted lightly about village news and school matters, completely unaware that his secret was no longer hidden. Ngozi, are you alright? He finally asked, noticing her silence. She looked up slowly. Yes, I'm fine. But inside, she was burning with questions. That evening, she finally gathered her courage. After dinner, she followed him again, but this time, she didn't wait. She knocked on the study door before he could lock it. Ngozi, he said from inside, startled. Obina, she said, voice calm but firm. Open the door. There was a pause. Then the sound of keys jingling. The door opened slowly, and there he stood, slightly sweaty, short-creased, eyes nervous. She stepped inside. We need to talk. Obina swallowed hard. Can it wait? No, she said. Not anymore. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him and asked the question that had lived in her heart for too long. Why do you refuse me every night, only to choose yourself? Obina's face crumbled. I saw you, she whispered. Last night. I know. He didn't speak. He didn't deny. He simply turned away and sat down. Tears welled up in Ngozi's eyes. Am I not enough for you, Obina? Have I ever failed you as a wife? Obina's hands trembled. And for the first time, he looked up with shame in his eyes. You didn't fail, he said quietly. I'm the one who is broken. His words hung in the air like thunder, heavy and dark. Ngozi didn't know what hurt more, his rejection, or the pain behind it. What was this brokenness he spoke of? And what secret had been haunting their marriage for all these years? She was finally ready to hear the truth. And he had no choice but to speak it. Obina sat in silence. His face was pale, his hands locked together on his lap, knuckles tight. Ngozi stood by the door, her arms folded across her chest, trying to hold herself together. A storm was brewing in her heart, pain, confusion, anger. But above all, a need for answers. She stepped closer, speaking softly, Obina, please. Just tell me. If there is something hurting you, why didn't you ever let me in? Why have you been punishing both of us with silence? Obina looked up. There were tears in his eyes, but they didn't fall. His lips trembled slightly, as if the words inside him were chained to fear. I never meant to hurt you, Ngozi, he finally whispered. I didn't know how to tell you, because I've never told anyone. Ngozi knelt beside him, her voice now filled with calm strength. I'm your wife. You can tell me. Obina looked into her eyes, and for the first time in their marriage, he allowed the wall inside him to crack. When I was 12, he began slowly, I lived with my uncle in the city. My parents sent me there for better schooling. But my uncle, he traveled often. And when he was away, he left me in the care of his housemaid. He paused, blinking hard. She was older. Much older. At first, she treated me like a younger brother. Then like a friend. Then, things changed. One night, she came into my room while I was sleeping. She touched me. I didn't understand what was happening. I was scared. Confused. She said it was normal. That it was something all boys learn. Ngozi's eyes widened. Her hand gently covered her mouth. Obina's voice cracked. It continued for months. I never told anyone. I was ashamed. I didn't even fully understand what she was doing. But something inside me changed. I began to feel dirty, like I wasn't mine anymore. He looked away, tears finally falling down his cheeks. When I grew older, I thought it was behind me. I even convinced myself that marriage would fix everything. That being with a good woman like you would heal me. But I was wrong. Ngozi sat quietly, her own tears slipping down her cheeks. She reached out and held his hand. It was cold and trembling. Obinna continued, every time I get close to you, my body shuts down. My mind returns to that room. That night. I want to be with you. I love you, Ngozi. But something in me freezes. I feel fear, shame, disgust, not for you, but for myself. His shoulders slumped as though the truth had drained his strength. I couldn't tell you. I thought you'd see me as less of a man. Ngozi's heart broke all over again, but this time, not from rejection, this pain was different. It was the pain of knowing the person she loved had been carrying a silent wound for so long. Obinna, she whispered, you are not less of a man. What happened to you? It wasn't your fault. You were just a boy. He turned to her, surprised by the gentleness in her voice. Why didn't you trust me enough to share this before? She asked. I was afraid, he said. Afraid you'd leave. Afraid you'd think I was weak. So I buried it. And I pushed you away, thinking I was protecting both of us. Ngozi leaned her head on his shoulder. For a long while, they sat in silence. The only sound in the room was the quiet rhythm of their breathing. The air was heavy, yet lighter than it had been in years. You should have told me earlier, she said finally. Maybe we could have started healing together. I know, Obinna said, and I'm ready now. I can't live like this anymore. They agreed that the next step must be healing, not just for their marriage, but for Obinna as a person. A few days later, Ngozi spoke to the village priestess, who connected them with a traveling therapist named Boba Chuka, a retired elder who had spent years helping people carry invisible pain. He was wise, soft-spoken, and deeply respectful of the secrets people shared. When Boba Chuka came to their home, he listened without judgment. He nodded as Obinna shared his story again, this time more freely. Then he turned to Ngozi and said, healing is a journey. It begins with truth and continues with love. The sessions were slow but powerful. Obinna began to understand how his trauma had shaped his fears, his emotions, his silence. Ngozi also spoke, sharing how the loneliness had eaten away at her, how the rejection had made her doubt her own worth. Boba Chuka helped them find words they had never used before, words like forgiveness, shame, connection, intimacy. Weeks passed, and the air in their home began to shift. The coldness in the bedroom became warmer. The silence at night was replaced with small conversations, then shared laughter. Obinna started sleeping beside Ngozi again, not in passion, but in peace. They held hands before bed. He no longer flinched at her touch. And for Ngozi, even this simple closeness was a beginning. But the road ahead was long. Though they were healing emotionally, physical intimacy was still distant. Obinna was trying, but fear still crept in. He would pull away at the last moment. And Ngozi, though patient, couldn't stop the ache in her heart. She began to wonder, could she live the rest of her life without that part of her marriage? Could love alone be enough? She didn't want to rush him. She knew he was trying. But deep down, she feared that the wound inside him might never fully close. One night, after a session with Boba Chuka, Ngozi sat alone in the garden. The moon was full. The wind carried the scent of blooming lilies. She opened her diary and wrote, I love my husband. I understand his pain. But I am human too. And I need love in all its forms. Can two people heal together, but still remain apart? I don't know the answer yet. But I pray for wisdom. Inside, Obinna stood at the window, watching her from a distance. He loved her more than anything. But even love, he was learning, was not always enough to heal what had been broken in childhood. The journey was far from over. But at least now, they were walking it together. The weeks turned to months, And though the air in the house had shifted, the walls still echoed with silence during the nights. Ngozi and Obinna had made progress. Emotionally, they were closer than ever. They spoke openly, laughed more, and even held hands as they walked through the market square. From outside, their love looked stronger, reborn. But in the privacy of their bedroom, the space between them remained. Obinna still struggled to be fully intimate. Sometimes he tried, laying beside Ngozi, whispering sweet words, kissing her softly. But just as things grew tender, he would pull away. His body would freeze, his breathing would grow shallow, and a quiet panic would rise in his eyes. Ngozi never pushed him. She would simply hold his hand and say, "It's okay. We'll try again another day." But with each failed attempt, her heart grew heavier. She missed the closeness, not just the physical part, but the sense of being wanted. She knew Obinna loved her, his kindness was real. Yet, love without desire felt incomplete. One evening, after yet another gentle retreat from Obinna, Ngozi found herself crying in the shower. The sound of water masked her sobs, but her soul felt bare. She began asking herself the questions she had long avoided. How long could she wait? Was it fair to ask him for something he wasn't ready to give? Was it fair to deny her own needs in the name of patience? That weekend, they returned to see Baba Chuka, hoping he might guide them through the growing ache. Baba Chuka welcomed them with warm kola nuts and quiet eyes. He listened as Obinna spoke about his efforts, how much he loved Ngozi, how much he hated feeling broken. Then Ngozi spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't want to leave him," she said. "He's my husband. I've seen his heart. But I am also a woman, and I have needs too. Is it selfish to want to feel wanted? To crave closeness?" Baba Chuka didn't speak immediately. He sat in thought, eyes closed as if listening to something deeper. Finally, he said, "Sometimes love is not about holding on, it is about recognizing when two hearts need different healing. Love does not always mean staying, but it always means honoring truth." Obinna's shoulders sank. "So what are you saying? That we should end our marriage?" "I'm not saying that," Baba Chuka replied gently. "But I am saying that sometimes, the most loving thing two people can do, is to stop hurting each other while trying to hold something that no longer fits." They sat in silence after that, each lost in thought. The ride home that day was quiet. Ngozi stared out the window at the open road, thinking about her life. She had built her world around Obinna. She had given him her heart, her body, her loyalty. But somewhere along the way, she had lost pieces of herself. That night, as they lay in bed, back to back, Ngozi turned slowly and whispered, "Obinna, can I ask something, and you promise to answer with full honesty?" Obinna turned to face her. "Yes. If things never change, if you never get better in that part of our marriage, will you still expect me to stay as your wife? Even if it means I live without something I deeply need?" Obinna's eyes filled with pain. "I would never trap you, Ngozi. I've only hoped you'd stay because you love me. But I know I haven't given you the love you deserve." Ngozi nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time we face the truth." The next morning, she rose early, prayed for strength, and began writing a letter to Obinna, not of anger, but of clarity. She poured out her love, her patience, her hope, and her sorrow. She told him how proud she was of his courage, how honored she felt to have been trusted with his deepest pain. But she also wrote about her loneliness, her fading joy, and her need for something more. When Obinna read the letter, he cried. For the first time in years, he truly saw Ngozi, not just as his wife, but as a woman with a heart that had gone dry while trying to pour into his. They sat on the veranda that evening, watching the sun slip behind the hills. "I don't want to lose you," he said quietly. Ngozi reached for his hand. "You won't. But maybe we can love each other from afar. Maybe the best thing we can do now, is let each other go. They agreed, with heavy hearts, that it was time. Time to stop fighting what couldn't be forced. Time to let their love transform into something softer, respect, care, maybe even friendship. The news shook the village. When they announced the separation, tongues wagged. People asked, how can the most perfect couple split? But neither of them explained. They didn't need to. Those who understood, understood. Those who didn't, never would. Ngozi moved to her late mother's house and began teaching young girls about self-worth and emotional health. Her story became one she shared privately, with those who needed strength. She started a support group for women struggling in silence, and her name began to carry meaning beyond beauty. Obinna, too, found purpose. He began mentoring young boys in the village about healthy masculinity, about trauma, and about speaking out. He used his story to build bridges for others who were afraid to talk. Though they lived apart, they remained kind to one another. On holidays, they exchanged greetings. On special occasions, they still sat under the mango tree they had once planted together, sharing tea and quiet memories. Their love didn't die. It simply changed. They had not failed. They had grown. And in Molola village, their story was not told as a tale of heartbreak, but of courage. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a husband and wife can do is love each other enough to set each other free. 2 years had passed since Ngozi and Obinna quietly went their separate ways. Molola village, once buzzing with gossip about the perfect couple who couldn't survive marriage, had grown quiet again. But the story of their separation still lingered in hushed conversations, in church corners and under market canopies. What most people didn't know was how much strength it took for them to walk away from each other with dignity, and how much healing happened after they did. Ngozi had blossomed into someone the village admired for more than her beauty. In her late mother's house, she started a center for young women, a small place where girls could come after school to read, learn life lessons, and speak freely without fear of shame. She named it House of Quiet Strength. There, she taught more than just reading and writing. She taught self-worth, emotional honesty, and how to speak up when something felt wrong. Many girls who had grown up afraid to question their elders or express their feelings found new courage under Ngozi's guidance. One girl, Zara, who had once been withdrawn and shy, was now confidently planning to become a village nurse. Another, Ifeoma, opened up about being touched inappropriately by a cousin, and with Ngozi's support, her family believed her and took action. Ngozi's pain had turned into power. Obinna, too, had found a new path. He continued teaching at the village school, but on weekends, he held private sessions with boys and young men, where they could talk freely about things they were too scared to say at home: trauma, fears, shame, identity. He named the group Voices of Stone. He shared his own story with the boys, not in detail, but enough for them to see that even a man who seemed quiet and strong could carry deep wounds. Through his honesty, many boys found the strength to speak. Some cried for the first time in years. Others simply sat and listened, eyes wide, realizing they were not alone. For Obinna, the healing was still slow. But he was no longer walking through it alone. One hot afternoon, during a community event, Obinna and Ngozi crossed paths again. It was at the opening of a new borehole donated by a local NGO, and half the village had come out to celebrate. Children ran through the dusty yard, elders sat under trees fanning themselves, and the sound of talking and laughter filled the air. Ngozi was wearing a simple green dress and head wrap, her smile calm but bright. Obinna approached her with a warm nod. "You look well," he said. "I feel well," she replied. "And you?" He smiled, stronger, lighter. They stood for a while in comfortable silence, then Ngozi said, "I've heard good things about your boys' group. And I've heard House of Quiet Strength is saving daughters from silence." They both laughed softly. "Would you like to join me for tea sometime?" Ngozi asked, surprising herself. Obina nodded. I'd like that. A week later, they sat under the same mango tree where they once talked about dreams and fears. But this time, there was no burden of expectation, just two people who had been through a storm and come out wiser. As they poured tea and shared news about their lives, Ngozi asked, do you ever think of what might have been if things had gone differently? Obina looked at her and said gently, sometimes. But then I remind myself, we became better people through the pain. Maybe we were meant to love each other, so we could become who we needed to be for others. Ngozi nodded. Maybe we were never broken. Maybe we were just growing. The words hung in the air like a blessing. A few months later, Bolola village was gathered once more, this time not for a wedding or a funeral, but for something rare and powerful. Ngozi was invited to speak at the Women's Festival of Healing and Wisdom, a newly introduced event by the elders and youth leaders of the region. She stood on a small wooden stage, dressed in a flowing white wrapper, and addressed a crowd of hundreds. My story, she began, is not one of shame. It is a story of silence, struggle, and strength. She spoke of her marriage, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She didn't name Obina, but those who knew understood. She shared how love had carried her far, but truth had set her free. She encouraged women to listen to their hearts, to speak their needs, and to know that leaving something that hurts does not mean failure, it means freedom. The crowd was silent. Many women cried quietly, their hands folded in their laps. Some reached for each other's hands, finding comfort in shared pain. When she finished, the entire village stood to applaud. Even the elders, who rarely showed emotion, wiped their eyes. After her speech, Obina walked up to her with pride on his face. He didn't say much, he simply held her hand and said, "Thank you, Ngozi. For being brave. For being you." In the months that followed, the story of Obina and Ngozi became a tale that spread far beyond Bolola. It wasn't a tale of scandal. It wasn't told to shame them. It was told as a lesson. A lesson that not all love stories end with a wedding. Some end with wisdom. Young girls and boys, when taught about marriage, were now taught about listening, about healing, and about honoring both love and self. Ngozi later married again, this time to a gentle farmer named Jude, a widower with 2 daughters who adored her. Their love was quiet, steady, and full of presence. Obina never remarried, but he found joy in mentoring and teaching. His life was full of meaning, and his heart no longer ached with shame. They remained friends, sharing tea during festivals, smiling across village gatherings, always greeting each other with respect and calm joy. And so, in the heart of Molola, the story lived on. A woman once left alone in the night found her voice. A man once trapped by trauma found his strength. Together, they chose truth over appearances, healing over silence. And the village never forgot.